Hello everyone, it's Jamarl Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. So this is my typical patron appreciation show. I do these once a week for my patrons. After all, it's called patron appreciation. It's the least I can give to thank everyone for their contributions and their help supporting the show. One of my patrons, Fred Edwards, I'm choosing his for today because I like it. The Smith-Mundt Act, or the repeal of the Smith-Mundt Act. Now, before I get into that, two announcements. First announcement. Patron is no longer allowing me to do the t-shirt giveaway. They're saying that the t-shirt giveaway violates their term of use. Fair enough. If it violates their term of use, it violates their term of use. I had to remove the items from the tiers. Otherwise, they would have shut down the account. Second part. I got to be honest. I don't necessarily know the distinctions between the tiers outside of the t-shirts or whatever, because everybody can, for the most part, give an idea for as a patron. I guess this depends on whether or not that this becomes this kind of differential advantage if the tier differences. Personally, I want to flatten the tiers, but flattening the tiers would essentially mean that people who are giving more, but that's just it. I don't necessarily know what one tier gets over another, but that's what I want to do. I will do a poll on that where you guys can sound off on whether or not you're okay with me doing that. If you're not okay with me doing that, that's perfectly fine. This is one of those things where I'm going to leave up to the patrons to decide if it's okay. So the Smith-Mundt Act. So the United States was forbidden from issuing propaganda, overt propaganda, to the public of the United States. We looked at that as a Soviet thing. The Soviet Union had Pravda, and the Soviet Union would essentially scrub information or not necessarily give certain information and did not have a free press in the sense that we would consider to be a free press. In no sense considered a free press. And we looked at it as a bar of our betterness. Just, we are a better country because of a free press. And to show that we're a better country because of a free press, we allow the press to do what they want. If they need to criticize us, they can criticize us. We have an open government. We're a democratic or representative government. This is us. This is a mark of this is a mark of accomplishment, or this is a mark of something to be proud of. Well, fast forward to 2016, and I think it was 2016, or 2012, I'm sorry, where this was silently repealed, silently tucked away. But it gets worse. The Smith-Mundt Act and the repeal of the Smith-Mundt Act is not the thing that I think is even more damning. It's the Ministry of Truth. The thing that Obama put into the 2016 appropriation bill, the National Defense Appropriation Bill, which essentially allowed for the United States to, quote unquote, counter disinformation. Now, this gets extremely dangerous. I mean, it's bad enough that you're going to get rid of this idea of propaganda or creating propaganda for the United States itself. But you get into this secondary aspect of releasing funds and money in order to, let's say, steer reporters in a particular way. And it's uncertain as to how far this goes within the standpoint of tamping down on what they consider to be, quote unquote, disinformation. What it boils down to is just information that they don't particularly like, or information that is antagonistic to the aims of the United States government, whoever the government is, because you can imagine that the government changes and the goals and the perspectives of the government changes, which makes this so dangerous. Do you realize back during the time before Hitler took power, there was a piece of legislation, God, and I wasn't planning on and thinking about this, so I can't necessarily think of it off the top of my head. But there was a bit of legislation that was added into government for Germany. And it was that bit of legislation that essentially allowed Hitler to take power in the way that he did. We have to be very careful. The legislation that people put into office is not necessarily put in for the best of times. It's often put in for the worst of times, because you're not necessarily going to know who's going to be in power, and you're going to want some constraint on the individuals that was going to be put in power. Obama put in the Ministry of Truth just before Donald Trump takes office. Just before Donald Trump takes office. And just to give you the specific name of the Ministry of Truth, it's Countering Disinformation and Propaganda Act. They signed that into law. Bernie or guillotine, still waiting for you to release the honest Tom Perez, Democrats give a shit about you, terms of... Still waiting for you to release the honest Tom, Democrats give a shit about you, terms of conditions apply, t-shirt for sale. That is a lot of words to put into a t-shirt. All right, so right here, let's go to Zero Hedge. Because the Smith-Mundt Act, don't get me wrong, and just to give a heads up on the Smith-Mundt Act, but I want to slip over to the Countering Disinformation because I think that's more dangerous. Smith-Mundt is a strand. The Countering Disinformation ups the ante. Let's flip, if we can flip this. Let's see. Hopefully this is showing okay. Give me 1 second, guys. I'm sorry. I changed the output on this because I thought the stream could bear it, but it looks like the stream is looking rough. National Defense Authorization Act for the fiscal year of 2013. Let's see, right here. The United States repeals propaganda ban, spreads government-made news to America. Now, the overt way, or what they're trying to sell this as, Voice of America and some of these other outfits that give propaganda to other countries, was not allowed to take place here. After 2013, that was no longer true. That was signed into the bill. For decades, the so-called anti-propaganda law prevents the United States government's mammoth broadcasting arm from delivering propaganda to American audiences. But from July 2nd, that came silently to an end with the implementation of a new reform passed in January. The result was an unleashing of thousands of hours per week of government-funded radio, TV programs. To this, I gave somewhat of a so what. This got a so what to me. This law wasn't in place during the war in Iraq, meaning the propaganda that took place from the standpoint of the Bush administration, using the media like a fiddle in order to get the public and whip the public into this thing of a war frenzy that allowed it to dump, what, $5 trillion or $6 trillion at this point? Not to mention the lives of, what, 4,000 Americans, several hundreds Brits, not to mention over 1 million Iraqis, and how many other people that have been displaced and killed based on the wars that have taken place. None of that was done through the Smith-Mundt stuff. That was all done through just the basic propaganda that took place from the standpoint of our regular media. They repealed Smith-Mundt. I gave that a so what. This other one, not so much, which is why I want to pivot to the second one. This. Countering Disinformation and Propaganda Act. That was signed into law in 2017, and apparently, and I think that's more dangerous. Because it's interpretation. Law is interpretation. When a person looks at a law and they make a determination on how they're going to follow that particular law, they decide to interpret it the way they want to interpret it. So a person could say, I'm going to interpret that life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness means that we need to have an environment that can be left to our kids, which means that I need to have that the government itself needs to take a much larger interest in making sure that climate change doesn't destroy the world. I can interpret it that way. I can interpret it any way I want. Now, a court can come back and say, whoa, that interpretation jumps the shark. But it's still your interpretation. When Obama came into office and the mass surveillance thing, the interpretation that Obama was using went well beyond what the Bush administration had in mind for spying. It didn't stop him from interpreting the law in that way. The law that allows, quote unquote, allows us to go bombing in Syria and support the Saudis deals with what was taking place from the standpoint of Iraq, the authorization of military force in Iraq. The interpretation of that, the fig leaf that Obama was using in order to bomb all of those other different countries, was that. Law is interpretation. It is not this hard thing that it's fixed. It is interpreted by the individuals that come into the office. This is why the Supreme Court is such a... It gets this idea of an impartial actor. It's not an impartial actor. It's a biased political actor. It's a partisan thing. But let's keep going. Because there could be other administrations that interpret this in a particular way that could be devastating to what I do for a living, what other people do in alt media, with this idea of trying to get a very specific line of thought. For example, did Bashar al-Assad use chemical weapons in the last 2 times that they've accused him of using chemical weapons? The United States wants you to believe that that is true. The United States and the media has been pushing this idea that that is true. They don't necessarily have any evidence of this. They themselves would even own up. Mattis, anyway, would own up to, we don't have any evidence of this. We're still looking for evidence for this. Social media was essentially what they used to condemn him. What does it mean if the United States government interprets this law in a way that says anybody that says something otherwise to this is going to be shut down? And before you say they can't do that, they have been scrubbing sites on Twitter and Facebook as if the people had never existed. People have been on for years. Blevins, the woman who works on RT, has had her Facebook site scrubbed. Thousands of subscribers scrubbed as if she never existed. Van Buren, the anti-war guy, I think he was working with the Ron Paul Institute on Twitter, scrubbed. Stalinist purges, as if the people never actually existed. This is the reality that we're talking about here, and this is just through the social media aspect of it, meaning this is private enterprise being squished by government for political reasons to essentially get rid of certain viewpoints that run afoul to the particular narrative that they want put out. This is profoundly dangerous. If this was taking place in the Soviet Union, okay. But the idea that this is taking place in America is terrifying. And you have to ask yourself, what is taking place? What has happened? Why has the trust in the media organization, the political edifice, has fallen so low that they need to take these draconian steps like this to try to force and corral people into a particular point of view? My argument would be that this boils down to a certain economic question. When people's lives are difficult, and not just people's lives are difficult, the lies that these guys tell, the things that they say that is completely detached from reality, the idea even that you're going to call the Department of Defense the Department of Defense is the Department of War. The propaganda has become so thick that people have been able to see that they're being lied to constantly, that the wealth, that their tax dollars is being used for things that they don't necessarily want those things used for, that what the people say is not necessarily what the people do. And I suspect that the ire for this, even though it's aimed at the entire political edifice, is more so at the Democratic Party, because between the two parties, it is the Democratic Party that says it feels your pain and is supposed to be the one that's out there working and helping and fighting for the working class. And they would do nothing of the such. Obama setting himself on fire to protect the banks while letting the homeowners go bust. Late on Friday, with the United States population embracing the upcoming holiday and oblivious of the most news emerging from the administration, Obama quietly signed into law in 2017 National Defense Authorization Act, which authorizes $611 billion for the military in 2017. Much of the balance of Obama's statement blamed the GOP for Guantanamo's continued operation and warned that unless the Congress changes course, it will be judged harshly by history. You too, sir, will be judged harshly by history. It's not just them. Obama also said Congress failed. I mean, the guy who got the Nobel Peace Prize ended up dropping 26,000 bombs. And the fact that you've allowed the authorization of military force in the first place, going into one country after the next, those were choices. You weren't forced to do that. 90% of the people that you were killing in some of these bombings were civilians. You've killed thousands of human beings. The idea that you're going to point the finger at Republicans saying history is going to judge them harshly, you too will be judged harshly by history. You too. You weren't forced to do these things. You made choices. But while the passage of the NDAA and the funding of the U.S. military was hardly a surprise, the biggest news is what was buried inside the provisions of the National Defense Authorization. Recall that as we reported in early June, a bill to implement the United States' very own de facto Ministry of Truth had been quietly introduced to Congress. As with any legislation attempting to dodge the public spotlight for countering foreign propaganda, Disinformation Act of 2016 marks a further curtailment of press freedom and another avenue to stultify government approach without the bureaucratic restrictions to counter foreign disinformation and manipulation, what they believe threaten the world's security and stability. No, it just threatens their power base. That's what it does. The issue here is that information has been coming out that has been going beyond what they would typically want the public to understand. And the public has been more rowdy, and the public has been looking at the political edifice with anger and disgust. And they are looking to find ways to curtail the information that the public is getting. This information is coming through the avenues of social media. Some of that is bogus, but you've always had bogus information. At some point, there were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. It is question of whether or not Gaddafi was going to murder his people in mass in the way that the media says he was going to murder in mass in order to kill those people. There was no missile gap between the Soviet Union and the United States. And Guatemala was not in association with the Soviet Union. I guess my point is, there was always false information that floated about. This is different. The point here is that people have become more sharp with regards to looking at information and pointing at the government itself. All of the information is not false. That's the catch. That's the catch. They just don't like the fact that the public is starting to become, let's say, uppity. There was no association between Donald Trump and Russia. That was another fake news that went on for 2 years with the conspiracy theorists, where Politico comes out with a story saying, prepare to be disappointed. Prepare to be disappointed. Why? Because for the last 2 years, they've ran a conspiracy theory. They've always been fake news. It's only now that the United States has finally gotten to the point of saying, hey, we don't like the information that people are using. And we wanted Hillary Clinton to win that election. And Hillary Clinton lost that election. And we need to curtail this information because we don't like what the public is now seeing. We don't like it. Let's keep going. Also called the Countering Information Warfare Act of 2016, when introduced in March by Rob Portman, the legislation represents a dramatic return to Cold War-era government propaganda battles. These countries spend vast sums of money on define vast. You need to define vast. We spend nearly, we're going to spend $790 billion next year on military. Are you fucking kidding me? These countries spend vast sums of money on advanced broadcast and digital media capabilities, targeted campaigns funding of foreign political movements, and other efforts to influence key audiences and populations, Portman explained, adding that while the United States spends a relatively small amount on Voice of America, the Kremlin provides enormous funding for its news organization, RT. Surprisingly, Rob Portman continued, there's currently no single United States government agency or department charged with the national level development, integration, and synchronization of whole or of government strategies to counter foreign propaganda and disinformation. Long before the fake news meme became a daily topic for extensive conversation on such discredited mainstream portals as CNN and Washington Post, H.R. 5181 would task the Secretary of State with coordinating Secretary of Defense, the Director of National Intelligence, and Broadcasting Board of Governors to establish a Center for Information Analysis and Response, which will pinpoint sources of disinformation, analyze data in a true dystopic fashion, develop and disseminate fact-based narratives that counter the effrontery to propaganda. That is amazing. What is the point of Chuck Todd? What is the point of Chuck Todd? What is the point of Jake Tapper? It's not the point of mainstream news to disseminate news. Why is the United States government getting it to the point of this is truth? The Ministry of Truth. Now, right off the bat, already, you have stenographers who essentially just talk to the government and just relay with the government information. So this idea that they're going to have this Ministry of Truth and giving out this information in this way looks worse. Like, I guess what I'm saying is we've reached this weird Orwellian point where we've created a Ministry of Truth when already the United States had its propaganda outlets and the associations that it had with the press. It's now, I guess, trying to take a direct role and try to say, this is what we consider as the government to be truth. This is truth. Now, the question becomes, what does the state do when what it considers to be truth deviates from what other people and other sources, alternative media, or even for that matter, mainstream media, if it would have the temerity to deviate from what the government is considering to be truth? We've reached a terrifying point. Let's keep going. Fast forward to December 8th, when Countering Disinformation and Propaganda Act passed the Senate quietly, inserted into the 2017 National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, conference report. And now, following Friday's Obama signing of the NDAA on Friday evening, the Countering Disinformation and Propaganda Act is now law. We've been under that law for the past, year or so. I'm not going to read Rob Portman's full statement, but you can imagine that there's a certain degree of Orwellianness to what he's about to say. Because ultimately, the United States government, in some capacity, is going to be determining truth. The question becomes, what happens when what they consider to be truth, when other people deviate from that? And are these shutdowns of accounts and social media the result of these type of actions? Note, the Bipartisan Countering Information Act is organized around two main priorities that help achieve the goal of combating the constantly evolving threat of foreign disinformation from our enemies. The first priority is developing a whole of government. It's not our. It's not our. Whether they're enemies or not, I challenge this thing of our enemies. We take certain behaviors around the world and we take certain postures, and we're shocked as shit that other people take hostile postures, our hostile postures. So we put missile systems around Russia at the end of the Soviet Union collapsing, after saying we won't expand NATO 1 inch further eastward. And immediately afterwards, we expand it to the borders of Russia. And we're shocked as shit that Russia takes a particular posture of saying we need to develop systems to protect ourselves. Like, I guess I'm trying to make the point. This idea of calling people enemies presupposes something that I don't necessarily presuppose. The country is taking a particular posture that I don't particularly take. Let's keep going, but whatever. Let's keep going. The first priority is developing, and I don't like this idea of this idea of calling it as if all of us are in the same boat. All of us are not in the same boat. There are factions in this country. This is an issue of class. Okay, let's go past it. The first priority is developing a whole of God. Howard Zinn has this great lecture where he's making this point of this language that people use where they're making as if all of us are in the same boat when all of us are not in the same boat. The first priority is developing a whole of government strategy for countering the government propaganda disinformation being waged against us and our allies by our enemies. The bill will increase the authority, resources to mandate the Global Engagement Center to include state actors like Russia and China, as well as non-state actors. The center will be led by the State Department, but with active senior level participation of the Department of Defense, USAID, Broadcasting Board of Governors, the intelligence community, and other relevant agencies. The center will develop, integrate, synchronize whole of government initiatives to expose counter disinformation operations by our enemies and proactively advance fact-based narratives that support the United States allies and interests. I have no idea what that means. Honestly, I have no idea what that means. If you read that and you know what that means, you're a better person than I am. That can mean anything depending upon the person who's interpreting what that just said. Second, the legislation seeks to leverage the expertise from the outside government to create more adaptive and responsive U.S. strategy options. The legislation enables a fund to help train local journalists and provide grants and contracts to the NGOs, civil society organizations, think tanks, private sector companies, media organizations, and other experts outside the United States government with experience in identifying and analyzing the latest trends in foreign government disinformation techniques. The fund will complement, support the center's role in integrating capabilities and expertise available outside the United States government into the strategy-making process. It also empower a decentralized network to privatized sector. When Paul Ryan comes out and Paul Ryan says he's fighting for the little guy and he's fighting for freedom and that he's trying to help Medicare by essentially getting rid of Medicare, whether they realize it or not, they fuck themselves. Meaning the reason that people disbelieve them is because of them. The disintegration in our belief system, belief in the elites, if you want to call it that, is because of the failure of the elites. It's not because of the individuals themselves. The draconian measures that they need to take now in order to try to quote unquote counter it is because of their own failings. The Smith-Mundt Act, yes, is a big deal, and the repeal of it, agreed. But my argument here is this is a much bigger deal. We're living under this right now. Pillbox, see my Patreon messages about Ivan's shady existence. Ivan's shady existence. I'll check that out. Bernie or Guillotine. On the latest episode of On Contact, investigative journalist Helen Boninsky exposes Jimmy Wales' egalitarian Wikipedia as yet another tool for the ruling elite. Yes. You know, the Wikipedia thing, you have to be very careful with taking the stuff that's coming on Wikipedia because that information can be changed by pretty much anybody. And there's some cases where anti-war voices have been getting screwed over by the stuff that's been put on the Wikipedia page. So yes, that's true. Ivan has some good shows and can be witty. I don't know who Ivan is. I have to check him out. Pat Hacker. Garn, I know. How do we keep any national secrets if we're giving people like Blackwater top security info? That is amazing, right? That is amazing. You know, part of the reason why we give these guys secrets like this is because if we have the Freedom of Information Act, if it's hid within the government itself, that information has to be exposed. If the information is within the realm of a private enterprise, that information is hidden. Meaning, if Blackwater has a bit of information, we as a government or we as the public don't have access to that information, nor can we get access to that information. That information is, for the most part, gone black. They do that for political reasons. They do that for political reasons. It's not just, Pat, it's so dumb. No, Garden, it's not dumb. They do this in order to hide information. I agree with you. If the goal of this, if we wanted to keep, if our government worked in the interests of the public, then yes, I would agree with you. But if the government goal was to hide certain information, then the way that you hide that information is not by keeping it within the government itself. You hide that information in private enterprises, because private enterprises are, for all intents and purposes, black. The moment that people are searching for the information, they would say there's nothing here about that particular topic, even though there may be loads about that particular topic in some company that the United States government has associated itself with. Let's see. Jeremy Chase. I say let them keep creating more Edward Snowdens. Yes. Yes. Agreed. We outsource secrets because, one, contractors don't have to follow the same rules. Yes. And two, outsourcing intel is profit-making venture. Yes. Yes. Both of those are true. Project Redfoot. They want you to think they're dumb. Yes, I don't think they're dumb at all. I think Trump's an idiot. Yes. But for all intents and purposes, Trump is a reality show host with people telling him what to do, and he doesn't know any better, so he does what he's told. Soviet winter prison. Our government fundamentally works against the will of the population under capitalism. Is how capitalism works. You know, the interesting part, I agree with you. When the Women's March that is taking place now, that's anti-war, that's going, you know, this thing of marching against the Pentagon, their fundamental problem is that the problem, yes, is war, but the problem goes beyond war. The moment that you have a profit-making enterprises, meaning all of these companies are making tons of cash. When Obama is talking about, you know, we need to scuttle this F-15 thing, and the senators don't want to do it. How do you scuttle a project when it's a jobs program? How do you do that? How do you get a senator that's in a particular state where you have thousands of people in his particular district that is working at a particular company, and if you cut the military budget by a certain factor, that those people potentially will lose their jobs? This is a gross way to produce jobs. And there are other ways that we can produce jobs. But the fact of the matter is, there's a capitalistic incentive for our system and war machine to go along in the way that it's going. And until you deal with the capitalistic incentive that's in that, it is hard to get rid of the war part. I agree with them, though, that you need to attack this idea of war, because I think at the end of the day, I don't think people, all things being equal, are on board for this. I just think... There we are. Oh, there we are. We're back. Bernie or Guillotine 2020. Let's set up a Department of Media with nationwide elections where we elect journalists and give them government funding to cover whatever they want. That's an interesting thing. The thing is, we have journalists right now who are, for all intents and purposes, stenographers. I mean, what investigative journalists are you aware of from the standpoint of mainstream media? I mean, these guys have screamed at the height of their lungs about the Russiagate nonsense for 2 years. Do they honestly believe that that's what the public cares about? They don't. They don't. There needs to be a citizen uprising in regards to how we go about our way. It needs to fundamentally change. It needs to fundamentally change. Trudy, they weren't marching for me. Let them march to ratify the EPA. It could be ratified with just 3 more states. Clinton, Carter, and Obama states could have ratified, but they didn't. 2 times. Raytheon should be developing great fireworks for people of lose. We spent 100,000 SK on Chinese coordinate-based fancies. Good show last night from NJBS. I don't know who NJBS is. Funny how it seems like progressives, YouTube channels, buffering issues. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with this. It was working fine prior, and it's been working fine for God knows how long, and I may have to flip over to my Huawei. But up until this point, it's been adequate. There we are. We're back. All right, we're back. Look, if we have a system that's washed in cash, full stop, meaning the candidate that gets elected in the Senate and House races, the one that raises the most money, 90% of the time, that person wins. That is astonishing. That means that the thing that they care about is the amount of money that they raise, meaning that the person that they care about are the people who give them cash, not the public. You must understand that. This idea that we have a political apparatus that serves the interests of the top 1%, while simultaneously giving voice and parroting ideas as if it's also working with everybody else, that needs to be broken. That needs to be burned down. Part of the anger associated with going against the Democratic Party is for that specific reason. That party was supposed to represent the 99%. I have no fucks for the Republican Party. I have no expectations at all for the Republican Party. They are a party for the rich, and fair enough. They are a party for the rich. But the Democratic Party wasn't supposed to be that. Right now, there is no edifice that works at the behest of workers. Nick Braun is trying to create something. The Green Party is fucking about. But there is nothing where a person can vote for that's against war, that's against Wall Street. That needs to fundamentally change. And until that fundamentally change, nothing happens. Fact is, there is a craving, however, for this change. There's a craving for this change. Part of the reason that Beto, the one that's running against Ted Cruz in Texas, was able to raise, like $30 million in a short span of time, was because people want something fundamentally different that they haven't been getting. They understand that the political process is fucking them over. They understand that the people who are in those offices are not working in their best interest. They understand that their government, at this point, is a Frankenstein monster that is utterly detached from their whims and their wants. 70% of the population wants Medicare for all at this point. You don't have the votes for it. You can go down the list. This idea of education, even among Republicans, you can get them on board for this stuff. Nobody makes the argument. I am in Lisbon right now, and God, you have no idea how much it goads me when I have to get treatments. I have to go in the various places that I go to get treatments. I literally spent my entire day trying to find where I was going to go. You guys that don't like Jimmy Dore, word of advice, don't watch him. Love Jimmy Dore. Jimmy Dore is fucking awesome. He's not cracking up. What are you talking about? No, it's not. No, it's not that Jimmy Dore is cracking up. You've had a concerted effort of people attacking Jimmy Dore. Essentially, and I honestly believe that this is not necessarily a natural evolution of attacks. People like Sam Cedar and Pac-Man and hanger-ons like Ben Dixon, who essentially is trying to, jump into this MSNBC crowd. You have a group of people who are Democrats who vote Democrat. That's what they are. Sam Cedar is a creature of the Democratic Party. Fucking used to work on MSNBC if he's not still working on NBC after he made that rape joke with his daughter. These people are Democratic hacks. I make the argument that they're gaslighting and they're attacking Jimmy Dore, A, because they're jealous of Jimmy Dore's popularity, but B, because there are aspects of the party apparatus. They believe that the best that they can get is through the Democratic Party, missing the fact that the very energy that they give into propping up the party is the thing that allows a party to be as weak and as feckless as it is. If Cedar spent half of his energy attacking Dorr, attacking Democrats and holding them accountable, because at the end of the day, accountability means they lose. That's accountability. It's not this thing of, I'm going to bitch about it every so often, but at the point where the person runs to the election, I'm going to still support. No! If they are not living up to their philosophical expectations, then they need to lose. I understand that there's walking in the wilderness, but there's no magical door. There's no fucking magical door. This idea of Cedar and Pac-Man and all these other people have all of a sudden just cooperated around each other and has decided to attack Dorr. It's not that Dorr is cracking up. Dorr is responding to the environmental factors to which he's dealing with, meaning that even though he's not a Democrat, he comes out of a tradition of a left. And so he's still privy to this nonsense fuckery from the left. So people like Cedar is still in his ear. People like, Pac-Man is still in his ear. It's still in his ear. I understand you have significant health issues to deal with, so you're not only doing multiple videos a day, also around the planet. I couldn't touch this. Enough said, I hope. What? But I am doing multiple videos a day. What are you talking about? It's Sunday, and I've already done like 2 videos, and I have like 2 or 3 more planned. I think it was maybe like 2 days where we didn't get to do videos, but still doing them. Yeah, maybe I'm misunderstanding you, but with the exception of like 1 or 2 days, I'm still doing them. Sherry Specter supporting third parties is stupid and irresponsible as long as Trump is in. Yeah, I disagree with that. I massively disagree with that. No, yeah, Trudy, we completely disagree. This idea that you vote blue no matter who just because Trump is in office is nonsense. That's utter and complete nonsense. What does accountability mean if, because you're scared of Trump, whatever the Democrat does, you're perfectly okay with supporting? That's nonsense. That was a positive comment, Mar. How is it a positive comment? Maybe I misunderstood. Yeah, maybe I misunderstood. Have you seen the lame impression of Jimmy that Michael Brooks does? No, I haven't seen the lame impression because I don't watch that stupid fucking show. Brian Finley. No, I haven't seen The Work Wife. The Work Wife. I haven't seen The Work Wife's impression of Jimmy Dore. I can't tolerate it. I don't even like Michael Brooks' voice. Like, that's where I am. Like, it's such a lowbrow show. Not to mention, like I said, they're gaslighting their audience into this vote blue no matter who. Support the person that best represents what's most important to you. Sure, respect it. Yes. Yes. Anything else? Anything else is for all intents and purposes allowing people to go back. Why would you? Hillary Clinton wins 2016. And then Hillary Clinton wins in 2016. Let's say she nearly starts a war with Russia. Let's say she, I'm trying to think of horrible things that Hillary Clinton does. Let's say she nearly starts a war with Russia. Let's say she privatizes Social Security. Whatever you want to say, the horrible things that she does. 2020, and she's running against Ted Cruz. What do you do? What do you do? Oh, I see. I'm sorry 2 times. I misunderstood. Danny Nat, if we handed Jamarl Thomas a magic wand for a year to make the government do whatever you wanted them to do, what would you have them to do? So, a few things. Right off the bat, legalize marijuana. Stop putting people in cages. Give a pardon to the people who are already put in cages from the standpoint of pot. Two, and I guess those are two things. Nationalize the energy markets. We have an environmental catastrophe. And granted, I'm saying this, it doesn't necessarily have to be this blunt, but moving in these areas. There needs to be an understanding that the world is at stake. We believe and we trust science for all of these other things to explain our universe and explain what takes around us. Our world is a technical world. And yet on this particular issue, we pretend as if that's not real and as if that's something that's in the future, when it's not in the future. We're getting hit by these storms now. We're getting hit by these heat waves now. The Arctic is melting now. The oceans are acidifying now. All of this stuff is happening now. This is not later. This is now. And this is not even one of those things where they can fully predict, because fact is, these are models. Do not mistake the model for the real thing. The world does not necessarily operate or need to operate on your models, meaning there could be additional drivers that send this into a way that we can't necessarily predict. We need to do something about this. We should not have private enterprise in charge of avenues that could destroy the world. Full stop. Full stop. I interpret it, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, as to not necessarily having my kids, I don't have any kids, but my wife has siblings, to not have their world end based on capitalistic recklessness. Audit the Fed, and not just audit the Fed, nationalize to some degree our banking industry. And if not nationalize the banking industry, definitely put a bar on the door from the standpoint of Glass-Steagall and have a bank that allows lending. I'm operating this from the standpoint of a capitalistic system where the entirety of the thing is ripped apart, because I don't necessarily think you can get elected on that. Massive investment into worker co-ops. That's big. Workers should own the means of productions, meaning if a person is, cutting the lawn, if the person is doing, the people that make your society go, that keeps the lights on, that writes your computer programs, that builds your streets and fixes your bridges, that fixes your coffee, that serves your food. Those people make your society go, and those people should be the ones that pull the revenue from that, not having that money expropriated to the top 1%. In cases where people are part of companies, those people need to get shares of those companies. Yeah, I would be hated by the right. Fuck them. The end of the day, my goal in this is a better world. And that better world is not necessarily locked into this idea of a capitalistic system about a certain 1% of people being able to expropriate the wealth from everybody else. Fact of the matter is, we've invested heavily, meaning us, the United States government, into all sorts of industries, and we got nothing back in return for that. We should get things back for that. Meaning if we're going to invest and we're going to create the internet, then yeah, we should get things back for the things that we invest in. Solar power, green energy, undermining the relations with Saudi Arabia through a green energy project. Solar panels to the people's houses, meaning allowing people to get some kind of revenue back from the standpoint of solar power in their houses to make them not dependent upon the electrical grid. Yeah, there are plenty of things that you can do even within the capitalistic system. Even if you can't necessarily go all the way with that, there are a lot of those things that you can do. The worker co-ops thing is big. The worker co-ops thing is extremely big. Yeah, there are several things that you can do. It's just my thinking anyway. My thinking. Look, don't judge Dorr too harshly here, and I don't even know why people would judge him harshly at all. What Dorr is saying is fundamentally right. If you're not going to hold the people who you're putting in office accountable, then what's the point? If you're stuck in this situation where it's always in relation to somebody else, meaning I'm not voting for that person because I want that person to do something. I'm voting for that person because who that person is not. Then the fact is you give a free pass to that individual. That individual no longer has to do anything. He is utterly detached from you because you've given him a free pass. You've essentially said, I am so terrified of that monster that you can have your way. You have a free pass. I'm saying there is no magical door. That model needs to be broken. That person needs to lose and that person needs to fail. There needs to be a certain degree of accountability associated with the process if you really want to get anything accomplished. If you're perfectly okay with status quo, which it seems that people like Cedar and what's his name is, fair enough. Do your show. Do your show within the context of just keeping things the way they are and supporting bullshit Democrats who are never going to get anything accomplished. But if you really want to get something accomplished, that means being willing to burnish it down. If the people are not necessarily willing on the toe, you're lying. You're not a Democrat. And the goal of this is not to elect Democrats. The goal of this is to get a better fucking world and to get things accomplished. That's my goal anyway. And the people who I support are going to be people who I think are going to represent that interest. If that's nobody, that's nobody. Jimmy Dore is not wrong on that. If your goal is not to support the status quo, supporting weak, milquetoast Democrats allows the system to propagate in the way that the system propagates. In fact is, people are making all this stuff about Trump voters and everything else. Those people used to be Democrats. You need to interrogate why they're not Democrats. At one point, when Ralph Nader was running against Gore and Gore lost his own state. And the Democratic Party, instead of owning the fact that Gore lost on his own merits and Gore lost on his own state, turned around and blamed somebody else. Hillary Clinton lost a reality show host, and they turned around and did the exact same goddamn thing, never at once, interrogating what should it mean to be a Democrat. Is there somebody that vociferously, or is there a group, a party, an organization that vociferously represents the interests of workers, not the 1%, workers? Full-throated representation. None of this mealy-mouthed, milquetoast, I'm going to light myself on fire in order to protect the bankers. Obama could have given that money and paid off those homeowners, meaning paid off the debts. The banks would have still got their money if they paid off the banks. Instead, it protected the banks, allowing those people to go bust. There's better ways to do things, man. I'm with you on the nationalizing the banks and oil. We should abolish the stock market and convert it to loans and savings accounts. I think that would be hell to pay for it, but that's not necessarily a bad way to go. It depends on what your goal is. My goal is not to protect people's profits. Full stop. My goal is for people to have better lives. The point of life is existence. And pursuant to that level of existence, I want people to have a decent life. The goal is not to make people rich, if that makes sense. From the standpoint of the left, it should be anyway, the elimination of the capitalist class. And part of the way of starting to do that would be to take one plank after the next out of the capitalistic system, creating a different hegemonic viewpoint of people over a period of time. Meaning the hegemonic viewpoint that we have now of capital wasn't the viewpoint going back in the 40s or 50s. It's something that slowly evolved as people lived in the course of a time period and they kind of soaked their way and they considered this to be a certain degree of normality. We think about how difficult things are. And it's like, oh my God, what would those things be like if things changed? But we don't necessarily take into consideration the harm and the chaos of just currently standing still. How many people are living on the street? I met a guy in Egypt. I flipped out on the guy. because he cheated my wife when I came when I came back. But before I flipped out on the guy, and while we were on good terms, he said, I was in California. And he said, God, I had no idea there was that much homelessness in California. He said, I had no idea. Bob Romero said, vote blue no matter who is Sanders' message. Yeah, I disagree with him on that. I disagree with him on that, Bob. I disagree with him on that. B. Green, a statewide Florida recount was done by several newspapers. Gore won by 20,000 votes. Democrats said nothing. Why? Yes. This is my point. They're weak. Well, two reasons. They're weak, and they don't necessarily want to challenge the system itself. Because what does that look like? What's on the other end of that? At the end of the day, Democrats want to maintain the system, but Republicans are willing to burn the system down in order to win. Trump is a good example of that. Trump had no issue at all attacking the voting system itself and the integrity of the voting system itself. Democrats would never do that. At the very least, they haven't up to this point. So yes, that's true. Creative experiments. Jenkins said Democrats are paid to lose. Of course. Then he said vote blue no matter who. Vote blue no matter who. Weak or complicit. Both. B. Green is both. This is the Xena paradox. Have you ever used to watch Xena, the Warrior Princess? I have all of these allegories in my head. My wife hates them. But I think they apply. And Xena, the Warrior Princess, I don't even think they allow this episode to go on anymore because they found it to be offensive. But her and her girlfriend, who they never necessarily want to call her girlfriend, Gabrielle, was during a sojourn during India. Xena was having qualms about her warrior nature. Meaning she's like, God, I've killed so many people. I've been in so many wars and conflict. Ugh, I feel bad about this. I'm having this crisis of conscience in regards to whether or not I should go about my way in this way. She meets a mystic. And the mystic tells her, look, in your life, your role is the role of the warrior. Your role is not the role of the peacenik. In your previous lives, you were the role of the peacenik. But in this particular life, your role is to be the warrior. And you need to be the warrior full-throatedly. You need to be it unabashedly. And that is where your fortune lies, not in peacenik. You should not have this equivocation on this. You need to be clear in what you are. I say that that's the same thing in the problem with the Democratic Party. You have a party that is supposed to represent the 99%. You already have a party of the rich. And in this party, you have this utopian idea that the top 1% can somehow work in the same tandem with the 99% in workers, meaning labor working in tandem with this kind of top 1%. Well, the reality of this is what you end up with are people like Obama, who says and speaks in a particular language while simultaneously working at the behest of his corporate donors. Workers should demand more. In the UK, Jeremy Corbyn is full-throated, unabashed, has support of labor. In the United States, you have nothing of that. Bernie Sanders is the closest thing that you have to something like that. Maybe a Tulsi Gabbard, but they are few and far between. I want to say Barbara Boxer, and somebody else kind of brought her name up, and she's been, I need to look into her. But they're few and far between. Ocasio-Cortez she's young. She's young. I'll say it that way. She's young. Quit being obtuse. Danny Knapp, once you abolish the stock market, you give investors a shared interest in the success of people. They would want people to do well so they can buy houses, cars, and solar panels. Environment creates reality. How you're organized. There's a logic to things. The kernel of the logic at the core of a thing is going to have an outsourced impact on how that thing turns out. If your political system is based in cash, regardless of what you want to put on top of it, regardless of what you want to say, where the incentives lead is where people are going to go. That's going to be lowest energy level that people go. I would make the point that the political system that we have makes perfect sense from the standpoint of people taking cash and doing favors, because the incentives lead to people taking cash and doing favors. If you created a system where the incentives led towards success for human beings and human beings living, you'd have a better world. There's never been a point where our society has stopped and said, how do we want to live? How should we live? We've continued just from one incremental change after the next, with every so often having an upheaval, but still propagating on from that point on. But never a conscious change and choice of let's do something different and let's do something for us. And this idea that a top 1% gets to own the overwhelming majority of the wealth, why? Why? That makes no sense. We used to have these things of kings and queens, and these guys were supposedly appointed by God. And you ask the question of, what do you mean they were appointed by God? The top 1% is not that much different. They're an unnecessary part of our society. If you do the labor, you should get the work. That money shouldn't be expropriated to the top. Full stop. I'm being too loud, unfortunately. I voted Democrat until 2010, wasted my energy. Obama allied with Al-Qaeda, no Democrat cared. Creative experiment. I voted until 2012. The last vote for a Democrat, I think, was Obama. And after 2016, I voted Jill Stein. Proudly voted Jill Stein. Just because opportunities are latched onto an issue doesn't mean the core thesis is false. Yes, that's true. God, that's true. You have no idea how true that is. And since you said it, I suppose that you do. One of those things came up with, and I'm going to do a video on it, where they're trying to make the argument that trying to get rid of the jet from Saudi Arabia, Mohammed bin Salman, that's some kind of regime change operation for the sake of Iran. And no, I haven't seen him. I don't even know who Caleb Markins is. I don't think you realize I'm in a silo. My day is spent looking for news. I'm on a hamster wheel. I don't get the opportunity to look for other stuff. The stuff that I look for is usually looking for content that I think the audience would like. And that, two things. Informative, that the audience will like, and news, recent news, especially big stuff dealing with war and that type of things, because those are the things that get into my craw. D. Martin, not proudly, you don't believe in our values, you would now vote Democratic Party. I would vote for Bernie Sanders, who's an independent. I hate to tell you, he's an independent. Oh, RT correspondent. No, I didn't see a stream. Science is based on consensus, not experiments. I'm sorry, experiments, not consensus. Yes, that's true. Yes, it's experiments. Bernie is trying to stop the Yemen. Yes, he is. Yes, he is. Bernie Sanders came out and made a statement essentially saying that we need to stop with this war in Yemen, and the whole idea of even our involvement in Syria is on shaky legal ground. Shaky legal ground is an understatement. If Bernie Sanders is going to make the argument that us engage with Saudi Arabia and Yemen is illegal, then Syria is right along with it. But yeah, Trudy, he did. Trudy, he did. It's not just Obama on this one. I mean, keep in mind, in their mind, their thought was, if we support the terrorists, we can use the terrorists as a bludgeon to take down Bashar al-Assad. And the weapons that were given to these people who were moderate rebels, my ass, these guys were terrorists, fell into the hands of people who were even more bloodthirsty. Now, if you want to make the argument that Obama was giving it to, if there was such a thing as a moderate rebel, okay, but that's not what took place in real terms. In real terms, they use, and they were giving those weapons to anybody who they can get their hands on as a bludgeon to hit and attack Bashar al-Assad, to take that government down for geopolitical reasons. He failed. They didn't anticipate Russia involving themselves in the process, with Iran essentially propping them up, because what Iran knew was that if Syria fell, they were next. They were next. It doesn't matter who you vote for, because nobody would ever mirror the entirety of your will. Eliminate representative government. It's 2018. I agree with you, but I don't agree with you. Yes and no. We don't have burning or guillotine. We don't have to travel by horse and take a day off from the farm to be heard. Direct democracy is a long-term answer to every political problem. Yes and no. I mean, most people, half of the country doesn't vote. And you're going to have to get people to involve themselves in one political process after the next. And I would wager to you that they're not going to do it. They're not going to do it. They are not going to do it. I'm there with you, but the capitalistic system needs to go. And the focus needs to be on health and happiness of the human being, not on the maximization of profit. I mean, ultimately, what kind of world do you want? I mean, right now you have a hellscape. You have people living on the goddamn streets. The idea, the lives that some of these people live in, the squalor, is ungodly. And you have all of this wealth that is only real within the context of the system to which we operate in, sitting in somebody's bank account. Jeff Bezos by himself can get rid of the poverty on the planet. Jeff Bezos is not going to do that. Jeff Bezos is not going to do that. All right. I'm going to end this. I have additional videos that I want to do for tonight. You know, the wild part about it is that 2 times I misunderstood your comment, man. I'm sorry. It's you know, believe it or not, the difficult part was when I first jumped out of the country. I had additional help setting up treatments around the place in the various places or countries that I was going to go into, and that person no longer wanted to help me. And so I had to do that on my own. Now, that becomes somewhat of a problem because, of course, some of these are different countries, different languages, and all this other stuff. So it's setting up in various countries. And then not just setting up in various countries, determining, okay, where can I get treatment in any particular country? Because that ends the trip. If I don't have the capacity to go on the trip, for the most part, comes to a blunt end, either by me just keeling over or me acquiescing and going home. Going home wasn't an option, and so the intention of Batman, I was gonna say fuck that person who wasn't gonna help me, and I resented the fact that they weren't gonna help me because I felt that they were trying to inhibit my own individual will to make a choice. Now, I understand it, and it's two sides to this. I understand the perspective of the individual. Personally, I think she was just pissed off because we were having a back and forth. But it's this political argument of, oh, dude, you're going to kill yourself. I don't want to be involved. Well, it's nonsense. You've helped me on other trips that were just as bad, if not worse. But whatever. There's a potential that what she's saying is right. Or at the very least that her concern is earnest. So that means I have to figure out how to set this stuff up myself. For the first few weeks, I was freaked the fuck out because it's like I had everything planned up until I think the end of November, and it's like every day that you get closer, you have to plan the stuff out. To me, my thing was I wanted at least a month or two horizon for safety, because I don't want to get to the last minute and be like, okay, I don't have anywhere to get treatment, and so it was this kind of mad dash of finding, all right, where am I going to get treatments around the globe and everything else. Today, I finished getting the shit done at the very least for the European portion, and going into Turkey into January, and then from Turkey going out to like Vietnam. That's going to be a whole nother fuckery. I'll deal with that problem later. Like now you deal with the immediate problem that's in front of you. So the immediate problem that was originally in front of me was, all right, where are you going to get treatments? Now, when I look at the map, and I think I have the map up. Yeah, I have the map up. So when I look at the map, what I'm looking at are two things. All right, and I'll sever this video because some people may want to hear this. Right now I'm in Lisbon. I had the treatments booked out until Barcelona. That's when she essentially let off. Now, every plan, I look at this as a military thing. I even had the conversation with my wife. I was like, look, I need to be able to talk to you bluntly about our finances and about how we're going to pull this shit off. So initially, no plan of action, at least not most, withstands the first interaction with the enemy. That's what I've heard anyway. I've kept that in because I think that's true. You never necessarily know what the enemy is going to do, and you never can necessarily completely look at the world as the world is. You're always looking at it kind of at a distance. You're making approximations on what you think you can tolerate, what you think you can afford, all sorts of stuff. So in this case, I created a calendar for when I would need treatments and all this other stuff. That calendar is not going to work. I found this shit out early on. So it becomes, all right, the calendar needs to be different. That calendar is too much of a hellscape, and there is no way that's going to work. So the calendar changed. In addition to the calendar change, the map changed, because the moment that I leave Barcelona, I initially had us going through Spain and London and all this other stuff. Fuck that. I'm going to end up in Poland. This place. Not that place. But near this place. It's like Glabicek or whatever. What's in Poland? Who knows? The Warsaw Ghetto is in Poland. But going to Poland because I can get inexpensive treatments in Poland, which is what I'm going to need after the hellscape of treatments in Barcelona. I look at my calendar, I look at my map, and I try to make plans around the globe as such. It's funny, as I was talking to my wife, I was like, God, man, I'm sorry of the physical weaknesses. Like, because I don't like this idea of her having to deal with negative consequences from shit that's related to me. Like, I may have my own weaknesses in a sense, but I don't necessarily like the idea that those weaknesses adversely affect her. What I mean by that is there's certain places that she wanted to get to that we're not going to be able to get to. But fair enough. It's what it is. Now, the thing is, I look at it as, like anything else, we make compromises. And those compromises are, what can I do versus what can't I do? And you have honest conversations about what you can pull off versus what you can't pull off, and what you can tolerate. Here's another example. I don't have my calendar up. We spent the last 6 hours finishing the next 2 months. So initially, this calendar was far more hawkish from the standpoint of treatments. And I booked Barcelona under this guise of a brute force idea of treatments, but I assume it is impossible for me to know what I can tolerate in advance. I've done stuff like when my wife and I got married, I think I went like 9 days. It's like 6 days in, you're like, oh God, this is brutal. And you try to find like saunas and stuff like that in order to try to bleach the water out of your skin, to try to cut down on the amount of fluid that you're taking on, and then try to find other avenues to eliminate as elimination channels. That was probably the most brutal, I think, that we've gone through during the marriage. And so I look at that and I say, all right, how does that graft itself onto a world trip where you're not going back home anytime soon and you're going to go from place to place to place to place? You can't do that everywhere you go, nor can you do it even once, because if you do it once, you shoot your load. It's like you've done it once, you need to recuperate after you do something like that. And usually if you can go back home to the States, you can just kind of recuperate. So you can't do that. So whatever you do for a calendar, it has to be done in a way that takes in your own physical limitations and juxtaposes that against what you can afford. That's when it gets interesting. And that's why you get a chart that gets fucked up. Now, what I mean by that is, so if you look at something like this, initially the first goal was, all right, I can do one for this because this is expensive. Whereas Barcelona, not as expensive. Lisbon is not as expensive. Lisbon is like $200 less than Barcelona. So any treatments that you want to get, you need to make sure you get them in Portugal with as few as possible in Barcelona. This is but this is nonsense. Like, this is doable only though because of the number of treatments we're going to get in Portugal, but this is horrendous drawn. But what you learn from this being horrendously drawn is to not replicate that. This is survivable within the course of one time, even in the course of more than one time, providing that you're not doing it back to back. But by the time I leave though and go to Poland, Poland is like it's funny, even though Poland is kind of out of the way, Poland is a safe haven in an odd sense. So it's weird and it's fascinating. I guess my point is 2 times. I consider what I do as a job, and the job itself has to go on regardless of us traveling, and regardless of that. It's like this is secondary to what I do. And this part is my wife does medical coding. Friendly reminder to fit a cryotherapy treatment into that schedule. You're showing on the screen cryotherapy. I don't know what cryotherapy. Okay, cold treatment, some kind of cold therapy. My wife does medical coding, and so while I'm sitting here doing videos, she's sitting there doing medical coding. So both of us essentially kind of set up our stuff and do our stuff around the same times. It's weird. It's interesting, but we're making it work. Hope you're following this, people. Jamal's full-on honesty reality. I hope you find the proper treatment, Jamal. This dude is doing news while coming from a car accident while simultaneously getting treatment for his medical issues. Thank you, Jamal, for his news. Yes, I got the cast. Oh, that's funny. That's funny. Why not spend a lot of time in a cool place like Lisbon and absorb the local vibe for weeks, bouncing from place to place? That is a lot of vibes. So we're staying for 2 weeks. We are staying for 3 weeks. We're staying in Lisbon for like 3 weeks. Barcelona is going to be 2 weeks. Poland is like 3 weeks. So yeah, we are. It just depends on the place. You must understand the place. I don't have the luxury of choosing a place just to choose a place, if that makes sense. All things being equal, I would love to go to Berlin. All things being equal, I would love to spend weeks in Berlin. Berlin is fantastically expensive. All things being equal, I would love to, spend weeks in Amsterdam. Again, Amsterdam is horrendously expensive from the standpoint of treatments. Treatments. That's the point. Treatments. If I was a European citizen, if I was, let's say, born in Germany, all of this, no expense. Like me going from place to place, I could spend several weeks in one of the countries because there would be no issue. The expense associated with it wouldn't exist from the standpoint of getting the medical thing. Being a U.S. citizen, our medical stuff is not paid that way. I mean, we don't even have, they have a different level of dialysis here where they call it, what is it, high hemodialysis filtration or something like that, which is essentially, think of like super dialysis, where it's a higher level where the clearances and everything else are higher than what it would typically be in the United States. It's fucking fascinating. They asked me, he says, are you okay with this? I said, yes, yes. Every drop that you can give, yes. Because keep in mind, from my standpoint, some places it's going to be going without. And so every bit that I can get, I take. It's fascinating, man. It's fascinating. Do the same thing in other places, dude. Fuck Vietnam is too fucked up to get medical. No. Vietnam has medical thing. Vietnam is medical tourism. Vietnam has medical tourism. In fact, they have one of the hospitals is actually a pretty decent hospital. No, I'm definitely going to Vietnam. I'm not leaving Vietnam. Fuck that. Vietnam, Bangkok, Cambodia. I'm going to all those places. I mean, depending upon, again, whether or not you can get treatments. So Poland, inexpensive. Lithuania, inexpensive. Yes, I'm going to Lithuania for a week. So yeah, it just makes you realize how fucked up our medical stuff is in the United States. We do have Medicare. Medicare pays 80% of the bills, but you're stuck with a 20% of the bills. If you don't have insurance, you go into essentially debt, or you have to request that they write off the bills. So the company that provides dialysis, for the most part, takes a hit for the bill. And even with that, Congress was passing, was bundling the amounts that goes to the facilities, so that our what we do from the standpoint of treatments in the United States is massively fucked up. It's massively fucked up. Maybe I'm mistaken. I've heard otherwise. No, it's not that I think you're mistaken. The last that I've looked at this was a few weeks ago. It's not a Fresenius facility, but there's a facility that's supposed to be decent. I mean, I've read the reviews on it. The people said they've had a decent thing. They didn't speak a lick of English, so that's going to be fascinating. But the other stuff, thank you, Pat. For your next treatment, chin up. No, I am feeling fucking phenomenal. So that, look, there is a, let me show you this. Look at this, look at this, look at this. This doesn't look like much, you know, lines on a page. But all of these, none of this was filled in. Like only up until Barcelona. The end of Barcelona was a part where it's like, oh my God, what's next? Today, I was able to fill in all of this, including getting requests or sending requests for the various places that we're trying to go to. The goal is, it's never going to be perfect. Meaning, it's never going to be a situation where I get to do exactly what I want to do, because there's certain, you can say, constraints that I have associated with, you know, just operating, just physical constraints. Is what it is. As long as you're not necessarily so wed to the exact thing that you want to do, you may be able to make a compromise to get something similar. Many of the places that I want to get to, there's certain compromises. So I may have to travel like an hour from point A to point B, but so what? That's twice a week. That's not a horrible thing in the context of what you're trying to accomplish. No. My chin is fucking to the ceiling. Fucking phenomenal. Fucking phenomenal. All right, I'm going to end this because we've been running our mouth. Why can't you get another fixer? Because the fixer was initially from the United States. And that person was essentially in charge of everything dealing with nephrocare. And because she was the person who was in charge of everything dealing with nephrocare, anything that would go through the United States would go through her. Fuck her. I don't need her for to do this. And at this point, I've already accomplished what I needed to do. All of the places that I've done, I've been able to get on my own without any assistance from her. And not just being able to do it on my own without any assistance from her, doing it the way I want to do it. I got it. It's done. At this point, it's done. So, my, you know, not to mention cheaper. Not to mention cheaper. It's worth some risk, dude. But if you waste all, yeah, dude, I don't know how to say it to you. It's a locked door. That's not a door to go through. It's a locked door. There is no fixer. There is no magical door. I'm the guy who has to do it. I'm the guy that did it. But again, it's done. It's a moot point. The one, and she wouldn't be able to do anything to help in like Vietnam and Cambodia and those places anyway. So I would have to do that anyway. I would have to do it anyway. No worries. It's done. I've made contacts with a person who's dealing with the Vietnam facility. Goddamn, dude, it sounds like you got her into it. No, so the problem is twofold. I'll explain a bit of it. When I was I needed to get lab work. So if you're going from the United States, if you're doing any kind of dialysis stuff, you got to get labs, because from going from one country to the next, they need to make sure that A, you're not dying, and B, you don't have any diseases. So I get labs, and I go to Kenya. I get my labs to Kenya. And at the end, I get an email that says, from my facility to her. They're talking to each other. And it's like, we have no idea where the patient is. A, I hate being called a patient. I'm not your goddamn patient. I'm a person who's doing treatments. There's a difference in those things. And the second thing, yes, if I am overly aggressive about stuff like that, there are reasons. But they're talking without me being a part of the conversation. And they're like, we have no idea where he is. He's, ballistic. The thing is, in the United States, because these are private companies, the moment that you leave the United States, within a month, you're gone. You're no longer affiliated with a doctor or a company or anything else, meaning you are your own doctor. You are your own, caregiver, and it's all you. You are the person that have to deal with all that. Again, the United States healthcare. It's a for-profit industry. The goal of it is profit. If you can't necessarily make a profit off of somebody, then they're not necessarily going to use you. So You only had a month within the time frame to use any of the things associated with the facility itself. It's not to say that the people are nice, but the people are working for a corporation, and those people are going to stop dealing with you at the course of a month. So they're like, we don't know where he is. We don't know where he is. And it's like, I send a letter in bold print in Kenya. Like I told you in the last several emails that I was in Kenya. You know, what the fuck is wrong with you guys? I didn't say what the fuck is wrong with you guys, but clearly annoyed by this because I'm reading this while I'm in the middle of a coffee shop and I'm seeing this email back and forth. Now, in another exchange in this, she sends an email that essentially says something like, look, the lab work that you got wasn't going to apply. What do you mean the lab work that was going to apply? Meaning all of the stuff that I did while I was in the United States in order to get labs for Mercer, chest X-rays, all of the stuff, pain in the ass stuff, was no longer going to apply for the European agencies, which, again, it's like I'm sitting in the middle of a Kenyan coffin shop. What the fuck? What the fuck? So at this point, I'm responding, and I am not necessarily in the best of spirits, and I am perversely annoyed. And I'm like, what do you mean my lab work is not going to apply? What was the point of me getting the lab work, and how do you expect me to get the stuff that you're talking about from Kenya? In which case she didn't necessarily like the tone of that particular email, with her missing the goddamn point that I'm in the middle of a foreign country. And how do you expect me to get the things that you need and that you're telling me that I need now, and that what I have already given you doesn't apply? You should have told me that in the beginning, in which case I wouldn't have had to do it. I had to get the stuff from the countries that I was in, meaning I had to essentially get the stuff from Kenya or get the stuff from Egypt. You could probably buy a kidney in Egypt. I suspect you probably can buy a kidney in Kenya if you needed one. And so you could essentially buy a doctor. And not buy a doctor, but you can get lab work and stuff in those other countries, which is essentially what I had to do because the lab work had to be a month between the time period. So I was able to send that off. But at this point, the relationship is horrendous. There is not a good relationship at all. And any email they were sending back and forth, whether it's needing information or giving information, it's not necessarily sent in the best of tones. By time we got around to saying, all right, here are the places that I want to go. How much is it going to cost for those places? She was completely disinterested in helping in that process. And taking this kind of political stance of, oh, you're going to kill yourself. This is not typically the way we do it. I don't care if it's how we do it. I need these dates at these locations because these are the locations I can afford. And unless you're going to pay for them, then these are the dates that I need. She says, I think you should do it yourself. Fair enough. If I think you should do it yourself is your way of trying to fuck up my trip, then yeah, that's not going to happen. You're not going to fuck up my trip. Going home is not an option. At least not for another 4 or 5 months. Gotta go, but first, funny observation. Papa John's no longer his John's favorite as a special. It's now called pepperoni sausage 6-cheese blend. I guess people didn't like the order racist. Oh, that's funny. That's funny, Bertie, and thank you. I'm just starting to get into the YouTube game. Video essay podcast. Your content is superb, and I'm happy to see your channel is monetized again. Aw, thank you. Keep doing what you do, brother. Aw, thank you, The Lone Chemist. Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thank you. You can order transplant as much easier in those countries. Yes. Yes. So when my wife and I were in Kenya, the woman who I was talking to, I understood what she was doing immediately when I started talking to the woman. We went to Kenyatta Hospital. Kenyatta Hospital is a national hospital in Kenya. And I am, I don't necessarily need much. There's certain things that I need that rub against my own sensitivities. But I'm low maintenance under normal circumstances. And so me going to Kenyatta Hospital, as long as you're not killing me with the treatment and it is above board, just put me on a machine, I'm good. So they look at my stuff and They hand me off to a woman who speaks really good English, and she takes us down to a room. And within the first few minutes, it's clear to me what she's doing. She's trying to say, what she's basically saying is, look, the people who come to this hospital are people who need hospital or who need coverage here, who are having a difficult time affording it. And you may want a hospital that is of a higher scale and to the standards of the country to which you come from, and this is not one of those hospitals. She didn't want to put it in those terms, but that's essentially what she was going for. But she did say, have you considered a transplant? We can do that here within a few weeks. She's like, you can do that here within a few weeks. I live here in third world. Trust me, buying a doctor is how it works. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. In Kenya. Yeah. 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 They didn't. If I could have walked in and got dialysis in very short order, if I needed. In Kenya, Egypt, that would have been harder. It would have been harder. And by the time you get to Europe, it's a no-go. You have to have it in advance. It just depends on where you are. It just depends on where you are. It's wild. ID Warp. I keep imagining my wife shaking her head each time he makes one of those assertive statements. Yeah, she does it a lot. Or she would say, I don't need the monologue. I don't need the monologue. That's the part she would say, I don't need the monologue. She's like, you're standing here giving me a monologue. All right. I'm going to end this. I know I said I was going to end this a while ago. It's patron appreciation, so the whole point is to talk to patrons. I would love to see videos with you on the streets in these various places that you're visiting. Tara Thralls. Okay, fair enough. Okay, fair enough. I got to be honest. I didn't think people would be completely interested. I thought there are two things. I didn't think people would be interested, and I thought people may take it weird. My expenditures for the month hasn't really changed. Neither has my wife's. Depending on where we are, they may bump up slightly or bump down slightly. But ultimately, we stayed with my mom before taking the flight out. That allowed a certain savings before and after, meaning putting money in the bank for a return trip if we need, like, an emergency. And allotting a certain amount essentially to say, look, in the same way that we can live in the United States, pretty much live anywhere. Like we have to pay, we used to pay $1,200 a month for rent. Pay $1,200 a month for rent anywhere. The biggest expense is getting out of the country. Once you're out of the country, at that point, you're just paying whatever you're paying going forward. As long as you're not traveling like you're on a vacation, you can pull it off. So what I mean by that is, like, on a vacation, you're like, vacations are different. Like, this is a different mindset. Anything that you take with you, you have to drag along with you, so you're not buying a bunch of shit. And anything that you get that you do want to get, you need to send back. So you have to essentially create posters and send it back. But ultimately, your expenses are budgeted and allotted, and you go from place to place in that way. So there's an estimate on how much it costs to get from point A to point B, and that has to be baked into the account. There's an estimate on how much you can afford to spend on housing. That has to be baked into the account, and that money is paid up front. The additional cost for me is treatments, but the basic cost for the most part stays the same. 1,200 posh pad in my neck of the woods. So here in Richmond, that was essentially just our rent. It wasn't posh. It was just, I think, normal, standard. I think in Richmond you probably can get somewhere for like $1,000. But once we lived with my mom, that we were able to drop that to like $700. So we were able to cut our rent in half. And I think we lived with my mom for 2 months, no, 3 or 4 months. So all that money just kind of went towards the trip. Yeah, it's doable. It's just the living after being on your own for so long and then moving in with your mom. That's a weird experience, man. That's a bizarre experience. I love good calamari. Yes, can't stand bad calamari. Agreed. Rise up and replace after the whole system is burned to the ground. Well, the only way you can get a new system is if the old one is ended. Find the best calamari in Lisbon and film it. So I've been eating so much fucking bread. And they smoke so much. Like in Virginia, smoking was outlawed into the various buildings. And in Europe, they smoke everywhere. Like, so there's one pub there's like 4 pubs around where we are. And my day, what I would do is I would get up in the morning, I would go out and I would go to the pub. I would get a ham and cheese sandwich. I shit you not. I've been doing this like every morning. And I would take my pad and I would go through the stories for the day. And I would sip tea and go through the stories. And, you know, oftentimes that ends up being two ham and cheese sandwiches and these huge fucking things. I've been eating so much bread. Now, the other thing is seafood. So Lisbon has amazing seafood. We went to a seafood restaurant and food here is cheap. So that ham and cheese sandwich with the tea is like $2. It's deli. Yeah, it's deli. It's like Spanish ham or something. But it's like deli meat. And the cheese is fucking amazing. Like it's the bread. God damn it. it's so much. Like it's so good. My wife has been joking the shit out of me because every day that I've been here, I think I've been like binging on sandwiches, and she's not wrong. So at the facility here, they give you your choice of a sandwich. Well, you know, give me a ham sandwich. I'll take it. And then you go somewhere else. I'll take a sandwich, a ham and cheese sandwich. We finally was able to go to a seafood restaurant, and they had, I think I got mackerel, and you could choose your fish. Now, that's hard to do when you don't speak the language, but you're able to essentially say, I want that one and that one. Yeah, it's decent, man. It's decent. I like it. I like Lisbon. And the style, I love the style. The people have this, there's a style. There's a coldness. My wife disagrees with me on this, at least from a high level. Yeah, I'm going to be fat when I get back. I've lost weight. So the bread thing doesn't necessarily bother me all that much. I've lost weight. In the other trips, like in Egypt and in Africa, I've lost weight. So this balances out.
It's called a pastelaria.
Pastelaria. That's
pastry shop.
Pastry shop. Pastelaria. Now, she disagrees with me with the style thing, but there is a style about how they interact with one another. There's a softness, or there's it's a less harshness that they interact with. But I've been binging on black tea and ham and cheese sandwiches. It's fucking insane. Giving a bread is the best thing I've ever did for a week. Project Redfoot. I feel you. I am probably going to have to go on some kind of bread cleanse when I leave here. Yeah, by the time I get to Poland, I'll probably be, with the first week in Poland, I'll probably be good. Probably be like, oh my God, what the fuck is wrong with them? All right, I'm going to leave this. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through Patreon. This one is a patron appreciation show, so this one is going to be specific to patrons. So thank all you guys for watching. This has gone on for like an hour and 45 minutes, so I'm not quite sure who's anybody watching. Not in Israel anymore, Jamarl. No, I'm not in Israel. People are joking me for that shit. My wife, I've never been to Israel. And I'll end it on this. Somebody was like, that's not the way the BDS movement works. that is true, but the first response is stopping pain. Just saying. If I needed meds for pain, I was going to get meds for pain. The idea that it's like stopping pain trumps that other stuff. Also, my wife has never been. And the wild part about this is her and I had a conversation where she says, you know, I used to hear you talk about the Israel thing. And she says, I never quite got it until I got there. And I'm like, what do you mean? She says, because she says, you know, you see these kids and, you know, you realize that those kids are going to be soldiers. And those kids are going to be just like those same people who are walking around with those machine guns going out patrolling the border. And when you go into like the Holocaust Museum, and the Holocaust Museum says stuff like, you know, we moved to a new place. And the operative word was somebody else already at that place. And if the operative word is yes, somebody was already at that place, then how did you move to that new place? And then she's like, you're able to more put together the fact that those guys going out with those guns are because they're trying to pacify a population that's angry that they're taking their land. Like, she didn't get it till she saw it. I didn't even get the opportunity to take her to Bethlehem. She got interrogated at the border. That was great. I thought that would be me. But yeah, you couldn't find it in Israel. You couldn't find it even in Egypt. Like, part of the reason why I've been binging on it is because I haven't had it in 2 or 3 weeks. I haven't had it for a month. No, 2 weeks. 3 weeks. Yeah, I haven't had ham for 2 weeks, like 3 weeks. Yeah, you couldn't get it in Israel, you couldn't get it in Egypt. They had these weird religious ideas around that stuff. Nevertheless. All right, guys. If you enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the Patreon. And guys, really, I thank you all for the support for the channel. I think that's everything. Thanks all. Have a good one.